Today's class is dedicated to the Refuah Shlema of Yocheved Chaya Bas Chana, and all those that need a Refuah Shlema. If you'd like to dedicate the class, you're welcome to do so. Let us know. So the student is taking a test. It's an important test in university, and there's a lot of time for it. So he says, I have the right to take it. He says, fine. But if in 30 minutes the test is not on my desk, you know what? 30 minutes is not enough. I'm not accepting your test. He takes it, he sits down, and he starts to write. 30 minutes finish, and all the kids get up, the students get up, they leave, and the professor is continuing. He's marking tests, he's doing some other work. And as he's doing this, the student is writing. He's going on and on and on. But an hour and a half later, it's 2 hours of writing. He gets up, he walks up to the professor with his paper. The professor says, I'm not accepting it. I told you a half hour is a half hour. He says, do you know who I am? He says, no. He says, well, you have to take my test. He said, no. You know who I am? He said, I don't care who you are. I'm not taking your test. He says, you don't know who I am? He said, no. He said, good. He took it and stuck it into the pile of the tests and walked out. Avraham Avinu, the very first Yid, were introduced to him in this week's Parsha. The truth is that we're told about him last week. The end of the Parsha, it says, Terach had the sons, and Avraham was one of these sons. But more than that, to know his background, what type of personality was he, what has he gone through in his life, what are some of his accomplishments, Torah tells us zero about him. We don't know who. The first thing we know about him is that Hashem tells him, Lech lecha me'artzecha, go from your land, from your birthplace. But the whole prior 75 years of his life, we know nothing about it. And the truth is we do know, but not from Torah. We know from Midrashim, we know from commentaries that bring from various sources. A lot happened in Avram's life, and a lot that's very noteworthy as well. Avram stood up against Nimrod. If we look in the Midrashim, Avram had, let's just say, a pretty turbulent beginning, to put it mildly. When he was born, Nimrod, who was the king of Ur-Kasdim and really of the whole area, according to most opinions. By the way, his name Nimrod is from the word mered, which means to rebel. He rebelled against God. He rebelled against the concept of what's truth and so on. But in any case, when Avraham was born, the astrologers came to Nimrod and they said, we saw in the stars that a son was born to Terach, who is going to fight against the norm. He's going to abolish the regular idol worshiping. Got to be careful. What they really saw was there was a star. Everyone saw it. There was a star in the heaven that swallowed 4 stars, one from. And they told Nimrod, Terach has a son. He was born, and he's going to rebel. And therefore, we suggest, Nimrod, that you take this son and buy him. Give Terach a house full of gold and silver in exchange for the son, and kill the son. Well, Terach found out, and he hid Avram in a cave for 3 years, as the Medrash says. And after 3 years, Avram gets out of the cave, and he starts to explore. And he sees this sun. The sun is hot. It's powerful. It's obviously bringing energy and bringing growth and so on. And he says, I want to worship the sun. And it says that he worshipped the sun. But then in the evening, the moon came and kind of pushed away the sun. So he started to worship the moon. The moon must be more powerful. Plus, it has stars that are its servants. But then in the morning, the moon was gone. And he finally came to the realization there has to be something which is greater. Now, there's different opinions if he was 3 years old, if he was 13, bar mitzvah age, or if he was 40. But Avram came to the understanding that there has to be a creator which is greater than all this. And an interesting anecdote or story that happened is that Avram's father, Terach, he wasn't just an idol worshiper himself, but he was an idol merchant. He sold idols. And the Medrash tells us that he once had to go out of town, and he let Avram, big mistake, he let Avram watch the store of the idols. And someone walked in, and when the person walked in to purchase an idol or to worship an idol, he would say, "How old are you?" You're 50, 60. You're here to worship an idol that was created yesterday. And the person felt uncomfortable. They left. Finally, a woman walked in with fine flour, and she said, "I want you to give this to all the idols as an offering." And she left. And Avram took an axe. He smashed all the idols, besides the biggest one, and he put the axe in the hand of the biggest idol. We all know the story. Nimrod comes back. He's devastated. All of his merchandise is destroyed. Gold, silver, wood, probably some stone stuff as well. And this is what happened. Avram says, "You'll never believe it. Some girl came in with flour and was an offering. They started to fight. I want to eat first. I want to eat first." It was crazy. They fought, and the biggest one, he won. You see, he got them. He said, "You're out of your mind." And he took him to Nimrod, the same king that he hid from. He took Avram to Nimrod, and he said, Nimrod said, "Listen, you bow down to me, or else I'll kill you." He said, "Fire? Why are you so excited about fire? Water could extinguish fire. Maybe we should worship water." And Nimrod said, "You know what? You're right. Worship water." He says, "But what about clouds? Clouds, they carry the water." "Okay, fine. Worship the clouds. But what about wind? Wind moves clouds. Wind moves clouds. No, wind, just worship." So he says, "Well, what about the human? The human could contain this wind. You could hold on to it. You could withstand it. The human could contain this wind. You could hold on to it. You could withstand it." So Nimrod says, "You know what? You worship my God, which is fire, or I'll throw you into a fire." And Avram, of course, did not worship the fire, and he was thrown in, and miraculously he was saved. Okay, beyond normal. It wasn't that the last second he didn't throw him in; he threw him in. He walked out unscathed. So here you have a situation where one example of many that Avram did something very noble and very tremendous, and Torah doesn't tell us a word about it. Why not? We shouldn't know that the first Jew stood up against the powerful king for the belief about it. Why not? We shouldn't know that the first Jew stood up against the powerful king for the belief in one God. He was ready to give up his life. He really did. I mean, miraculously he survived. Why not? So the Ramban, Nachmanides, asks this question, and he says, listen, could arrive with logic to the belief that there's one God. And Avram reached that. It's impressive. Whether he was 3 years old, 13 years old, 40 years old, but he came he got it. And the Rabbi Bechai tells us it's something which people can understand. You don't find this as a stream or a channel that is bringing water to crops that's not designed. It doesn't happen on its own. Hashem makes it happen. Or if you have a beautiful painting, you're not going to say the ink just spilled and it made a painting. Someone has to do it. So if you're thinking right and you look around the world, which is, by the way, part of what Chassidus teaches us, to contemplate, to reflect about the vastness, the amazingness of creation. If you think about it, you realize, hey, there must be a creator. It doesn't happen on its own. It can't. To that realization, he came and he got it. But Torah doesn't see that as noble, doesn't see that as amazing, doesn't see that as, let's talk about Avraham. He discovered God. Everyone around him, the entire social norm, all of his friends, teachers, peers, neighbors, they all believed in idols. And he was this brilliant kid. He figured it out. And he was right. Torah tells us nothing. Not a background, not an introduction, not any of his accomplishments. Why? Now, the Abarbanel talks about this, and he says, Torah starts with the prophecy. Torah starts with the communication from Hashem to Avram. There are two paths you could take. There's a philosophical approach that you reached belief in Hashem, or Hashem commanded you and told you, or he had a prophecy and he told you what to do. What's greater? When you realized it on your own and you worked it through and you got it, or Hashem spoke to you. We have a mitzvah. What's the word mitzvah? Mitzvah means a command. Where does this word come from? So mitzvah, in addition to meaning commandment, it also means tzavsa, which is translated as a connection. A mitzvah creates a connection with the person that's doing it from the one that's commanding him. Okay, if you're a simple person and the king comes to you and says, "Do me a favor," you're elated, right? You're excited. You're honored that you have the opportunity to do something. Why? Because he is so far removed from you. In our case, Hashem is infinite. You're just a creation. And Hashem comes to you and he says, light Shabbos candles, or put on tefillin, learn Torah, daven, whatever, give tzedakah. He's giving you the opportunity to do something for him. It creates a connection. It creates a relationship. It's not just, a command. That's why the Mishnah tells us in Pirkei Avos, they have a zar b'mitzvah kala k'vachamura. You should be careful in the small mitzvahs like in the big mitzvahs. Why? In any normal society, you have certain rules, right? We have a rule for a law that when you drive, you have to turn on your signals before you turn. Okay, and if you don't, it's dangerous for the car behind you or for people. You got to signal. You got to signal where you're going. Okay, it's not the same as driving under the influence of alcohol. God forbid. Okay, they're both important, but the great component of what it's accomplishing. You're eating matzah. What does matzah do for you, for the world? Whatever, matzah accomplishes something. Putting on tefillin does something. It has a unique purpose of why this mitzvah is being done. Whether we know the mitzvah, we understand the mitzvah, we agree with the mitzvah, but it has a purpose. But then there's a general concept. It's a relationship with Hashem, a command. God said, do it. So the first concept of what each mitzvah does, it matters. Big, small, important, not that we can measure it, but there are levels. When it comes to the general concept of a mitzvah, that it's a command, it's a relationship, it doesn't matter if you were commanded to chop wood or you were commanded to fast on Yom Kippur. Okay? It's a mitzvah that Hashem said to do. Now, if you're coming with your own logic, you philosophized, you studied, you researched, and you realized there must be one God. There must be a creator over everything. Then you're limited. It's only the part which you get with your human mind, which is only human. It's a finite mind. The moment that you have a mitzvah from Hashem, or Hashem tells you, believe in this, or this is how I want you to behave, now you transcended yourself. You transcended your mind. You transcended the human confines. It's a totally different concept. You have a relationship with Hashem. Okay? That's why we say the person that was commanded to do something is greater than a volunteer. Now, it doesn't sound very nice. When you're being paid to do the job or you have to do it, you have no choice, right? Hashem said you have to keep Shabbos. But what if you went on your own and you weren't commanded? You decided, I want to observe the day of rest, which you're not allowed to, but I want to observe the day of rest, even though I wasn't commanded. What's greater? He wasn't told to do it. He wasn't promised reward. He wasn't warned about punishment. And we say that the person that was commanded is greater. Why? Because the one that was commanded has a relationship. It's a connection. Hashem is telling him, do something, not because you decided on your own, I want to do it. This is why Avraham, we're introduced to Avraham only by the mitzvah when Hashem tells him, Lech Lecha. The Shalah HaKadosh tells us that Maisa Oves Siman Lebanim, which translates that the actions of our ancestors are indicators, signs, guiding posts for the children. Everything they did is a message for us. It's a lesson for us. The fact that Avram realized on his own that there's an Eibishter, Torah doesn't feel it's important to mention. Because what's important for us, what's a sign for us, is that Hashem told him and he did it. And we're attached. It's a mitzvah. That was the argument between Yitzchak and Yishmael. Okay? Avram had a son, Yishmael, from Hagar, and he had his son, Yitzchak, from Sarah. Okay? Now, Yishmael had a bris when he was 13 years old. Yitzchak had a bris when he was 8 days. Who's greater? And Yishmael would taunt him. He would say, thank you. You're 8 days old. You can't speak. You can't give you a bris. Wow. I was 13. They asked me. I could have said no. I knew how to fight, by the way. All right. And I agreed to do it. That's my commitment. I have a relationship with Hashem. It's a pretty good argument.
He knew how to do what?
What? How to fight.
Oh.
He knew how to use an arrow or two. The point is, I could have objected and I didn't. I'm committed. You had no choice. It's a pretty good argument. But he's really not greater because he decided, you know what? I'll do it. That means your whole relationship with Hashem is a logical conclusion that makes sense to your limited human mind. Yitzchak has a relationship with Hashem, which is long before he decided, understood. It's in his blood. They say it's in his milk, right? It's part of who he is. That's a difference between Avraham and Yitzchak. Avraham realized that there's a God. He threw away the idols and concluded there must be Hashem. Yitzchak was born into it. What's greater? Now, don't get me wrong. Someone that has to figure out on his own, he's not born with it, and he has to decide to do so, it says a lot. But if you want to understand what's the uniqueness of the first Yid, what's special about Avram, it's that he was commanded to do so and he has a connection to Hashem. You could transcend yourself. Socrates, the great philosopher, okay, was known for, let's just say, preaching interesting things to youth about democracy, democratic concepts, about freedom, about personal. And the government at the time, the Greeks, they were not pleased with him. And they basically sentenced him to death. They put him in a prison, but they knew that he is a tremendous gift to humanity and he's a great philosopher. Let's not get rid of him so quickly. They gave him the opportunity to escape. No one will know. You run away and we won't kill you. He said, no, I'm not going to run away. I am a citizen of this land. I also have to follow the rules. This was the decree. Kill me. If that's what you decide, that's what you decide. I'm going to run away. Everything I preach is. And he didn't run away. And they killed him. He was hanged. The Alter Rebbe said that when Socrates came to heaven, he said, I want a place next to Avraham Avinu, no less. Alter Rebbe said this. Why? What's the connection? He was killed, or risked, rather, and he was thrown into a fiery furnace because of his beliefs. And I also did. Actually, I was killed because of my beliefs. And they told him no. You know why? Because you did it, because you decided it makes sense to give up your life for this. Avram, his Mesiras Nefesh is because God said so. It's not the same. It may be valuable. It may be a great accomplishment. It may show on your commitment, but it's not a godly connection. It's a decision. People die for principles. Historically, they think it's worth it, whether they're promised reward, or they feel this is something which is not worth living without, or with, or whatever. You know, we could talk about it next week more about Akedas Yitzchak and various levels of dedication. But the idea here is to answer our central question: was Avraham a pioneer or a follower? Now, the truth is, he was a pioneer. He was the first. And being the first is always difficult. And it's a powerful thing. But that's not his greatness. His greatness is that Hashem said, and he said, okay. Hashem said, I'm allowing you the opportunity to connect with me and do so. And he did. And this is why Torah starts off with Avram's story, if you will, is Lech Lecha, go. Because it's a message to every single Yid. Hashem is telling him, you have an intrinsic connection to me, to the divine, and therefore you're going to rise above yourself. You're godly. Your neshama is part of God, and this is your mission in the world, to behave that way, to use this power, this strength, to be able to to lead your life in that fashion. Any questions from the audience that's watching live or in person? No? Okay.
I was thinking Patrick Henry, American Revolution. Say, give me liberty or give me death.
Okay. That's a good example.
Uh,
It doesn't mean he's bad,
No.
but it's a logical decision.
From what I remember, Socrates was poisoned, and technically he committed suicide because he drank the poison himself because he was a free man.
It's true.
Yes.
But the idea was,
Yeah. So they didn't hang him.
you're saying, okay.
But maybe different opinions. But I don't understand. Hashem told Avram Lech Lecha after the whole story with the fire.
Right.
Hashem didn't talk to Avram before the fire. Avram decided by himself that there is a God and he shouldn't worship idols. So I don't understand the whole story with Socrates and Gan Eden about.
Avram, his reward in Gan Eden today,
Yes.
is not because of the fire.
Yes.
It's because of all the self-sacrifice and nefesh that he had throughout his life.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, you can't compare it to Socrates' self-sacrifice because his was a logical conclusion. Hashem never told him. He decided that freedom or democracy is the way to go. And he can't say, "Oh, I deserve to be with Avram," because he also, dedicated his life not because of his ideas, because Hashem said so. It's true. The fire example is not the right example for this because that was his own idea. Thank you for joining. Yes.
Also notice that Hashem bailed Avraham out. He didn't bail out Socrates.
Well, that's even less of a reason.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Evidence.